Hello and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. So as usual, I will ask you to subscribe to the channel to help the channel grow so I can make more videos. Thanks to everyone who has subscribed and those helping me on Patreon. I am most grateful. So to continue here, we are on the marking section here where we want an auto mark to work out here. So I'm just going to click on mark this test, and as you can see there's an auto mark button here, so we want to be able to click on this and it tells me what this is going to do, and once I press OK, we're supposed to do something with this. So if I click OK now, nothing really changes, except I think in the URL here we can see auto mark is equal to true. So that's what we'll be looking for, and once we get that, we do the auto mark process. So let's see how the auto mark process should work. So first of all, of course, it's supposed to check what the answers are that this user has given us, and then we check against the original answers and we try to add a mark for that. So this will of course only work with answers that have, or with questions that do have answers already pre-made. So let's see here. If I click on the database here, I want us to see step by step what is supposed to happen. So when somebody saves their answers, they go inside this answers thingy here, but it's very possible that somebody will answer less questions than what was given. So as you can see, there's a percent counter here that shows how much has been answered. So it's possible that somebody will submit a 50% answered paper. So which means if we start by reading what's been answered, we may just get 50% of the information. So it's better to go and read the actual test questions instead. So once we read the questions, because the questions will always be 100% because those are the questions, and then we'll look for what the correct answer is in this correct answer column. And then once we're done with that, we go to the answers table and look for a particular, because there's question ID here. So if I go back to test questions, there is a question ID. So we're going to compare what the question, so we'll look through the results, and then we get the question ID, compare the correct answer with, and then try to find a row in answers that matches that, so that question ID. Then once we get it using the question ID, we look for the answer. Okay, I don't know why this one says that, but we look for the answer and then we compare the two. If the answers do match, then we'll give a mark here. So if they don't match, we'll put a 2. If they match, we'll put a 1. Easy peasy. And then we refresh the page. So let's see how that can work in practice. So like I said, first of all, we have to read the test questions. And what are we looking for? We're looking for a particular test ID. And luckily we have the test ID in the URL like that. And so that's all we need for now. So to fix things here, I'm going to go to mark test controller. And if you scroll down here from within the index function, scroll down to where it says if it's a mark set as marked, okay, and there's another if statement down here. Where is that? Set mark variable, is it? Set. I'm looking for something else that uses the get variable here so that we can simply copy. Yeah, this one looks more basic, so let's copy this one, which is unsubmit. So Ctrl+Shift+D if you're using Sublime Text. If you're using Notepad++, it should be Ctrl+D once you select an area to duplicate it. So if it's an auto mark here, it's an auto, oops, what am I clicking? If it's an auto mark, then this is what we do here. So let's say auto underscore mark, and then we are going to have to do what's here. So of course I want to read everything from the test questions, right? So let's go there and let's just run a query to read all that. So I'm just going to say select all from test questions where test underscore ID is equal to test ID. So that's all we care about. It's the test ID. Now we don't need to get everything, because really what we want to see is just the ID and the correct answer. This is all we care about at this point. So correct answer may be no, but so for as long as there's nothing in the correct answer here, we know this is something we cannot mark. So we'll have to look at one of these. And also the question type must be at least objective and multiple, either of the two. So select all from test questions where test ID is equal to test ID, and then we say and question type, just to be thorough. So we say question underscore type is equal to, so the question type should be equal to, we'll put an or there, multiple, like this, and also the question type can be or objective, right? Subjective, objective. Now we need this to be evaluated first so that the result of this is regarded as one entity. So we're going to put that in brackets. So if the test ID is equal to the test ID that we want and the question type is equal to either multiple or objective, then we are good to go. Okay, that's great. So once we do that, we can run a query. Now these other values are actual values except for the test ID. So it's only the test ID that we need in this case, which is this one right here. The rest of this is irrelevant. So let's remove that. So instead of tests here, let's use something else just to give a difference there. So this one is, oh, actually no, we'll leave that as it is. This is just, we need to get the result of this. So I don't know what we will call these. Original questions is equal to, like that. And there we go, we get original questions. So let me copy this and let's come down here and do a show. Just to see that we are actually getting the questions that we want. So let's refresh. And there we go. So it's working and we are getting questions. How many records are we getting? We are getting 3 records here. 1, 0, 1, 2. That's actually 4 records. So that's 1, 2, 3. Let's go to the next page. And there's question 4. There's 5. So what's going on? Oh, so the reason why the other one isn't showing up is because it's subjective. So there's no answer. Here there's an answer, there's an answer. But let's look for one that doesn't have an answer. There should be one, which is answer, teacher's mark. Okay, so everything does have question 1 is multiple choice as 2. So can chickens fly? Answer no. So this one is part of it. So that's 3 questions total. And let's see. There's an answer here and there's an answer there as well. So why am I not getting what I want here? let's go back to questions here, test questions, and let's see some of these last records. Okay, there's no second page, so this is the one right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the first question is, what is 5 by 6? Let's see if that is correct. Let's go back to the first one and do some troubleshooting. Okay, so what is 5 by 6? Very nice. And then let's go back and see if any of these is subjective. So there is one that is subjective here, and it doesn't have an answer. So what's going on here? Explain the range circle. That's the question. And where is it? Having to scroll down here. Explain the range circle. So why oh, sorry, my bad. These answers are from the student, so I was thinking these are teacher answers, so sorry about that confusion, but it is correct. This one of these is subjective, so what we are getting is correct. So we're supposed to get 4 only because one of them is not part of the is not one that we can auto mark. So things are good up to this point. So what we want to do though is to loop through this. So we're just going to say if this is something useful, just by doing that, and then we'll do a for each loop as usual. Now in this for each loop, we're just checking to see what we're looking for. Now we don't need to get every column here. The columns we really need are ID and correct answer. That's really it. So we can save memory by just getting 2 of those columns. We'll need the ID in order to find the other record, but then we'll need to know the correct answer. So in this case, original questions as key value. Now the key is not important. What is important is the question row. We'll call it question row like that. So that's the row which contains 2 columns only, ID and correct answer. So in this loop, now what we want to do is go back to the saved answers here, which is right here inside answers, and then find this particular answer by this particular user. So we're going to use the test ID and the user ID to find that particular record that someone answered, and then look at their answer, and then we use that to update this. So easy peasy, right? So the first thing we will have to do is we'll call it student, I don't know, maybe answer row. So the answer row is equal to, let's use the same tests model, and we're going to just get 1 because we're just looking for one of those, just the first. So what we are looking for really is, I should have put a way to use the first to get 2 columns at least, or multiple columns that is, but that would just complicate things. So for now, let's just use a query since we need 2 of these. Actually, wait, yeah, we need at least 2 columns. We either need to know the question ID, we need to know the question ID, and we need to know the test ID, and we need to know the user ID. So it's actually 3 items. Now in an ideal situation, we could just put an array here of those items and then match them, but we haven't put that situation, so let's just use query as we did here and run an actual query. So the more complex you make your functions, the less queries you have to write, but here we do have to write a query. So let's say select all from, actually let's just write the query here, since we don't need the query variable anymore there, we can just do it here, override it here. I mean, select all from answers, yes, where user ID be equal to, don't forget the full columns, user ID, and the test ID as well should be equal to test ID. And finally, the question ID should be equal to, let's use, of course, question ID. Where is that? There we go. Now, since we just really want one item, let's just say limit 1. Like this. We just want one record. So here I'm just going to run this query like that. Okay. And that should do. But of course, we need to add those items in this array. First of all, user ID. Yeah, what we will give for user ID. So user ID is indeed in the URL, and we already attached it to a variable right at the top here, that one. So no need to worry about that. We just paste user ID like that. Of course, it should have that. Let's duplicate a couple of times. Now the question ID, let's see here, question ID. Okay, so the question ID will come from this row. So copy that row like this, and then in that row we are going for the ID because it's part of the columns that we got. The other one is correct answer, but we're not using that yet. So here let's change this to test ID as well. Now test ID is just equal to ID here because right at the top here, that's what we called it. It's just ID. All right, so we know the test ID, we know the question ID. Good. And let's look at the correct answers from, so we have correct answer from here. So once we do this, I just want to do an echo here and just say show. The correct answer is this one. And then what do we show there? We will show the row correct answer underscore answer like that. Okay. And then we will do, let's duplicate this a few more times. I want to put this as a boundary so that I know when each record is done, since there are multiple echoes here. And then student. That way we get to see everything here. So we get to see the correct answer and what the student actually gave us. So also in answers, I don't want to get everything. I just want to get the answer that the student gave plus the ID of that row. Okay, so that I need the ID in order to update the mark here, and then I need the answer to know what the answer was. So same thing here, we'll say we just want the ID and we just want the answer. Just those two columns should do. And then finally, answer row is this one. That's what the one that belongs to the student. So answer row answer, just like that. Okay, pretty good. Now let's go back, and so we are not saving anything yet. If I refresh the page, okay, so I get a few warnings. Undefined property, user ID on line 77. Okay, so these things occur because we have wait a second. These are occurring in the test model, right? Line 77. Now the reason these are doing this is because when we read something, even with query, we check to see if there are those functions that should run automatically once we run this model. And then the problem is we are not giving it all the columns, so you find that here we are not supplying the user ID from this result. Meanwhile, it expects the user ID there to read who the user is and so on. So what we can do is go to models, and let's look for that test model, line 77. And let's just make it error proof by making sure that before we try to use this, we actually check to see if it exists. So we'll say if not empty, because empty also checks if a variable exists. So it's a good idea to just use that instead of checking for is set. We'll use less code. So let me close that. At least we won't have a problem there anymore. If I refresh, that's one less problem to think about. Let's look at 131 as well. Where is 131? Let's go down here. 131. Wait, there's nothing here. Is this in test model or what? Or mark test? That's the one. So let's go to wait a second, what was that? Controllers mark test on line 131. Why is that even an issue? Mark test 131. Where are we? Here. Okay, so answer row. Wait, what's the problem here? There's answer here as a column. From answers, let's go to that answers table. There is answer. So why are we having attempt to read property answer on array? Oh, okay, so I see what's going on. It's because answer is an array of objects. So what I need to do is put a 0 there like this, because I'm just getting the very first result. Okay, so forgot about that, and there we go. So as you can see here, we are looking at the correct answer is B, the student answered B. Correct answer is C, the student answered C. Correct answer is no, student no. Correct answer is yes, student yes. So as you can see, we are supposed to mark correct for all of these because this user got everything correct here. However, there's a simple issue here. There's yes with a capital Y and yes with a capital small letter. So we must normalize both of these in order to check if they are correct. So we use string to lower. That way we use lowercase only for all of them. We will be sure that we are comparing, because otherwise this is not really equal to that. If I refresh, now you see they're all normalized and they look the same. This will make it easier to compare. And not only that, we need to trim this one that's inside here to remove any leading and trailing spaces. That way we make sure that the space is not interfering with whether the answer is correct or not. So let's refresh, and there we go. Okay, so now that we know this, all we have to do is save into the database, right? Good. All right, so we just need to do a save, since once we compare this one and this one, this and this, if they're correct, then we save into the database. And then we redirect the page. So let's do that in the next video.